Hey, welcome to Souls and Hearts Be with the Word. I'm Dr. Gerry Crete, marriage and family therapist in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm here with.
I'm Dr. Peter Malinowski. I'm a clinical psychologist in Indianapolis, Indiana.
And you're joining us for our weekly podcast where we reflect on the readings that are coming up in the Sunday at Mass. And first of all, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And to you, Peter, a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too,
And I decided to be celebratory and I wore my Christmas sweater, if you can sort of make it out a little bit.
Yeah.
I see you're wearing what you normally wear.
No, this is you. My mother told me that I should wear a jacket, so.
Did she? Okay.
Which is very apropos for our readings today for the Feast of the Holy Family.
Right, that's right. Feast of the Holy Family. Yeah, beautiful devotion. And anyway, so what we like to do at the beginning is just read the readings. If you've already read them or whatever, you could skip through, you can forward through a few minutes and just jump right into our discussion. But we're going to do the readings. Before we do that, just want to mention what we do every week is we don't discuss this in advance. We each reflect privately, and we come with a kind of a major theme. And so my theme for these readings was you can make a positive change in your family system. That's what I have. What have you got, Peter?
And my major theme is to take time for your loved one, your spouse, or if not your spouse, then another family member or friend or God. All right. So take time with that loved one.
Sounds good. Okay, so we're going to explore those two different themes and our sense of the reading. So let's start with our readings. The first reading comes from the book of Sirach from the Old Testament. So I'll begin there. It's 3, 2-6, 12-14. God sets a father in honor over his children. A mother's authority he confirms over her sons. Whoever honors his father atones for sins and preserves himself from them. When he prays, he is heard. He stores up riches who reveres his mother. Whoever honors his father is gladdened by children. And when he prays, he is heard. Whoever reveres his father will live a long life. He who obeys his father brings comfort to his mother. My son, take care of your father when he is old. Grieve him not as long as he lives. Even if his mind fail, be considerate of him. Revile him not all the days of his life. Kindness to a father will not be forgotten. Firmly planted against the debt of your sins, a house raised in justice to you.
Second reading is from St. Paul to the Colossians. It is from chapter 3, verses 12 to 21. We'll be reading the long form. There's a short form and a long form. Brothers and sisters, put on as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, heartfelt compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If one has a grievance against another, as the Lord has forgiven you, so must you also do. And over all these, put on love, that is, the bond of perfection. And let the peace of Christ control your hearts, the peace into which you were also called in one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, as in all wisdom you teach and admonish one another, singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or in deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God our Father through him. Wives, be subordinate to your husbands as is proper in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and avoid any bitterness toward them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this is pleasing to the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children so that they may not become discouraged.
And the gospel reading is from Matthew, chapter 2. When the Magi had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you. Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him. Joseph rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that what the Lord had said through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. When Herod had died, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, Rise, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. He rose, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go back there. And because he had been warned in a dream, he departed for the region of Galilee. He went and dwelt in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He shall be called a Nazarene. And that's the gospel of the Lord. All right. So let's discuss a little bit. I mean, first of all, can I just say, because last week, just to kind of mention, last week we saw Joseph too. I think it was last week. We saw Joseph respond to a dream. And you made the point that I thought was really good. Like, he just acted immediately. And we see the same kind of action. I think it's really cool that Joseph, first of all, he's the one that gets the messages. It's
Right.
interesting. And that he takes action immediately and just does what the angel tells him to do. And I love the fact that he's like this protector figure. And he's just like there to take care of Mary and Jesus and take him where he needs to and make sure they're safe.
Mm-hmm.
So
He really lives out that role of being protector of the family, providing safety, security. And what's striking to me, and I mentioned this before, is that he's psychologically fit. He's ready and he's resilient, right? And what's striking to me about that passage in the gospel is that Mary, because Joseph loves her so much, as we heard about in Colossians, because Joseph loves her so much, she's ready to respond. She trusts him.
mm-hmm.
So the response is immediate. There's not bickering about it. There's not questioning. There's this unity within that holy family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's great. And so my main kind of takeaway or point was around you can make a positive change in your family system. And so maybe I just want to say something about what is a system. What am I talking about? Because I'm a marriage and family therapist. We talk about systems theory. It's kind of the background or the backbone of the whole profession, really. And so it's the idea that we are systems, that we're not just we don't only look at the individual and what's going on inside the individual, but we kind of focus on or look at how the system interacts with each other. And so when you make any change in a system, it has an effect on everybody. And the same body of Christ. Like, I think the Paul's description of the body of Christ is really a system, and all the parts have some function in the system. And if you take one away, or you affect one in a negative way, it has a negative effect on everybody. But conversely, if you do something positive to one part of the system, it will have an effect on the whole. And so I just was excited about this reading, because there's a lot of talk of family roles and how the different family members, husband, wife, children, how they're expected to relate to each other and function with each other. So I feel like between Sirach and then Colossians especially, but lived out with the Holy Family, we see the example of what God wants family systems to be. The reality, I feel, is that a lot of families just, struggle, right? There's a lot of dysfunction. There's a lot of struggling in the systems. And so what do we do, right? So who isn't in a family that doesn't have some stressors, that doesn't have some dysfunction? And so what can we do to at least have a positive impact on our system? And I feel like we're told that by St. Paul. He literally lays it out for us what we have to do. Because if we look at the chapter before, which we weren't doing, but just quickly, like he talks about like letting go of wrath and anger or lust, various things. But this chapter is all about putting on putting on, you read it, like putting on kindness and humility and gentleness
Right.
and these things,
Patience.
patience and love is the,
Right.
you know,
Overarching.
and
Yeah.
he's and he says love is, what does he call it, the perfection, wait, what was the line, um it's
The bond of perfection.
bond, thank you, the bond of perfection. And
Yeah.
to me, I love that, because love is the thing that keeps the whole system in place, keeps it all functioning perfectly, certainly. And so I'm just excited to like reach into that a little bit and look at that, and how do we do that, even because we can't control everybody in our system, right?
Right.
Because there's a temptation to try to do that. It doesn't really work, but we can affect our system.
Right. That's what really struck me in all of the readings, was that list: the heartfelt compassion, the kindness, the gentleness, the patience, and the forgiving one another. This is the program for family life. And that's why this reading, I imagine, was selected for the Feast of the Holy Family, which is what we're celebrating this Sunday. So so there it is. It's all wrapped up in a nutshell. But to me, what's really interesting is, how do we live that out? Because I think oftentimes these just stay at such a high level. They're just sort of abstract concepts. They're beautiful words. And so I'm really interested in where the rubber meets the road. How do we actually hang on to one of these things? Or how do we set the stage for these things to be lived out in our family lives? That's really of what's of interest to me, because I'm a very practical guy. I want practical change. I don't want to just stay in the level of the intellectual, because I think oftentimes it doesn't actually meet the earth. It doesn't get boots on the ground. So that's one of the things that we'll be talking about, and especially in regards to action plans. So
Okay, yeah, for
yeah.
sure, absolutely. So let's talk about this. I mean, I think it's interesting, that in Sirach, anyway, there's this huge discussion about honoring the father and mother, and and I understand that, and it makes a lot of sense, because a good system works when there's obedience, reverence, honoring of parents, right? And parents and children that are obeying, and this and that, and even making the point that when your father is old, I would assume your mother too is old, you take care of them. Well, again, that's the system. It's a system of love. It's a system that works well together. I mean, I can honestly say personally, because I grew up in primarily a single home, and didn't have a father that was terribly engaged and then left. So I'm not trying to I'm not trying to criticize or anything right now. I'm just trying to say there's a reality that I didn't grow up with that.
Something was missing. A huge
Yeah.
thing was missing.
And so I can see a lot of people reading this and going, how am I supposed to love or honor this father or mother, whoever it is, when it's the system's so bad or so dysfunctional, or not even present, or whatever, like when there's hurt and pain and suffering. So that's one of the things I just wanted to at least say, that this is God to me. When I read it, though, I say this is kind of God outlining what the ideal is, and what he's wanting for families, what he's wanting for his church ultimately, and that, not trying to discount the fact that in some cases it's impossible. I mean, to even if a person, you have a death, or you have a father who isn't living up to his part of.
Well, can I disagree with you?
Go
I
ahead.
think it's always possible to love. Even if a person's dead, you can pray for their soul, because we don't
Oh,
know.
I see. Well, I'm not saying you can't love them. I guess I
Okay.
guess, but it's a difficult thing to actively like honor and revere someone, because those are the words that are used when they haven't been present.
Well, that
I mean, you
certainly
can
could be.
choose to love. So I'm not
Yeah.
saying you can't choose to love.
Right.
You can
Okay.
choose to pray for them. But it's very difficult when someone has been
Abandon
actively
you.
harmful.
Yeah. I totally agree. And that's why it's a commandment, right? If it were easy, it wouldn't need to be a commandment. We don't have a commandment to eat lunch or to eat regularly because it's easy. We do that, right? We have commandments to do things that are that we're often inclined not to do. So to honor our father and mother, that commanment's there because I think there are levels at which we all harbor disappointments, wounds of various kinds from our families of origin. from our parents. And so this is a call to not deny that, not to ignore that, but to also but to sort of move in a way to supersede that. So that's why I think that's there. Now, I do think it has to be qualified, because the obedience, especially for adults, is not absolute. We want to have that in the hierarchy of priorities. If your father is commanding you to do something like shoplift, or something because he wants a special fishing lure, you're not going to do that, right? Because there's a higher law here. But in general, yeah, like my mother, we talked about it at the opening of the show, said, Pete, love the show. You gotta wear a jacket. You really need to wear a jacket. So I'm wearing this jacket, not because I love wearing this jacket, but because I'm honoring my mother. It's just,
Interesting.
She asked me for that. She asked me for that. She thinks I look better when I wear a jacket on a show like this. So I'm going to do that.
Now, what if she said to grow a mustache?
I would also consult with my wife, because my wife hates facial hair, right? So yeah, that would be a different case, and that shows that we have to weigh these things, right? Because sometimes a husband or a wife may not be asking from a position of love, and they may not be asking from a position of love. And so one of the things that comes to mind is that for husbands especially, because I work with a lot of traditional and more conservative Catholics. And sometimes this issue of wife obeying the husband is a real sticky point in the marriage, and wives obeying the husband, be subordinate to your husbands. And one of the things I tell the men is, look, you've got to be worthy of that in the way that you love your wife. This often gets played out in the bedroom, when there's different kinds of demands or things made there. As a husband, you've got to be loving your wife. And one of the reasons why, again, I think the Blessed Virgin responded so quickly is because she knew that Joseph had her best interests and the best interests of the baby first and foremost in his mind. And so, the role of the husband is to be putting his wife's interests above his own. Right. And if that's really what's going on, and the wife knows that that's what's going on, it's not going to be nearly so difficult to come to agreement, right? To collaborate, right? So
right. Well, I thought the point in Colossians where he says, "Wives, be subordinate to your husbands," and he says, "As is proper in the Lord." I just think that's an interesting qualifier, and I always also think, like, I forget which, it's not in this passage, but there's another place where he also says for husbands to love their wives as Christ loved his church.
Right.
Which is speaking to what you're saying,
right?
Is you have to be loving your wife is being willing to sacrifice everything, your whole life, like Joseph.
Right.
Like Saint Joseph did. He was willing to do anything
to
protect his wife and his child, or the Son of God in this case. And so he was willing, and I don't know. And that's where it's hard, where this becomes hard you were talking about boots on the ground, practical level, is when husbands aren't,
that's right?
When it's really bad, abusive or something. And it throws the whole system out of whack. So the way the system is supposed to function doesn't, if, for example, the husband is in some way, using, damaging, not loving, ultimately, his family.
Yeah.
And everyone's affected by that.
Everyone's affected by that. Yeah, I really do believe that if you look at the research in terms of the children staying with the Catholic faith, that has far more to do with the father than it does with the mother staying. And so there's a lot of tone setting that the father does in that home. And so, and a lot of times fathers don't realize how huge an impact they have with that. So,
yeah. So I agree here. Like we hear in the readings in Sirach and in Colossians, essentially husband has authority in his family, but we're also told how that should be expressed.
Right.
And the ultimate quality is love. And we're given qualities like putting on heartfelt compassion, which some translations say tender mercies, which I think
Hmm.
is sort of an interesting word. Kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
Yeah.
So to me, sometimes when I think of authority, and I just like, if I just like free associate, like what comes to mind, usually there's a negative, I hate to say it, but negative, I'm either thinking the Godfather, or I'm thinking, or I'm thinking some tyrannical
Right.
figure who's going around just after what he wants.
Right.
And that's not at all what we're being called to be as fathers and husbands. We're being called actually to be Christ-like.
I think these are really difficult readings in our modern world for modern ears, because these readings are all about authority and responsibility in the family structure. And our culture is all about liberty or license. I want to do what I want, and rights, and these are really
Mm.
emphasizing authority and responsibility and what that means and what that costs. And, and so a lot of times I think people will, imagine a lot of folks are not going to hear the long form of the second reading, and that gets into a lot of these issues today, because it's difficult. It's difficult to take this in. Ultimately, in a family system, though, somebody's got to make the call if there's disagreements between the husband and the wife. And I really advocate as much collaboration and cooperation as is possible. But in my marriage, once in a while, it doesn't happen all that often, we have disagreements that we can't come to resolution on. A lot of times it's about how we work with our teenage sons or our young sons, and sometimes I say, look, this is a kind of a guy thing. I'm going to put my foot down and I'm say, let's not enable this. We've got to challenge this guy, and so that's I think the reason why that's there, and it's a function of original sin, the fallen nature, because originally, Eve was taken from the rib of Adam's side, not greater than him, not less than him. We're talking about complementarity here, and not anything having to do with intrinsic worth. So.
Right. No, that's so interesting. And I'm thinking from a psychological level too, in terms of attachment theory, just a little bit, is that there is a natural desire for most mothers to want to nurture and care,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a natural tendency for fathers to challenge and push.
Right.
And children need both. And
Right.
they need more of one and more of another at a different time in
Right.
their lives.
Right. Right.
And so that is sometimes a difficult thing for a mom to like allow, okay, this is time for the dad to challenge and push a little bit more.
Right.
Meanwhile, the father probably needs to take counsel from his wife,
Yep.
also not to go overboard,
Right.
and the same, so there's this, if it's a harmony, it
Right.
works really well. But
Right.
yeah, sometimes it's not easy to exactly agree,
Right.
and so on.
Oh, and so that's I just think that that's something that couples should work towards collaboration. And it gets back to my key theme, which is, in order to do all of these things, you have to have time. You have to have time. If you
Right.
look at some of the research on how much time husbands and wives spend together, where they're
Mm.
focused on each other and they're not doing some other thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's really abysmally low.
Mm.
So one of the things that I think is really important is to carve out time. Is for husbands and wives to carve out time to be together on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and a yearly basis.
Yeah.
To be able to look at each other and to really listen and understand each other. When I have couples come into me, they know a lot about each other, but I don't think they really know each other. They know a lot about each other, but to really know, often that's not the case. That's not the case.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that with the time, because I know people are very busy sometimes, right? And they get so busy, and then they only have, especially everybody's working or running around or whatever. And at the end of the day, people are exhausted, and that's the amount of that's the time they have for their spouse,
Right.
is their leftover time. I know my wife and I do this thing, and I don't know if she used the word and I latched onto it, but twinning. So even if we have to like do stuff together that's crappy paperwork, emails, whatever it is, that's like, that we can't actually do it together, like, but we try to do it in the same room.
Yeah.
And we're at least sharing. It's not the same as what you're talking about, because we want to go deeper than that.
Right.
But at least it's being together.
Right.
And it's not just we're always in little corners in spaces apart from each other.
So 9 o'clock at night is the time that Pam and I get together. And
Okay.
9 to 9:45 together, and then we go to bed. We're pretty rigid about the bedtime.
I've noticed.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
So
that's a commitment. You've
that's
made
a
a
commitment
commitment to that
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the kids need to give us that space. And it's not like if the house is on fire, a kid can't come and tell us, or if there's a kid sick or whatever. We bend and flex, but we've committed to that time.
It's a priority.
And there's an expectation that we're going to be able to be there, and it really has helped us since we've implemented that. So
nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, should we move toward our action items for this week?
Yeah. Can I say one more thing?
Is it time? Well, yeah,
Can
of
I
course.
say one more thing? We got a little bit of time.
Yeah.
The other thing that about time and taking time that I'd like to emphasize is this other thing that my kids and we have done for many years, and that's the concept of snippets. And what a snippet is, it's 5 minutes, maybe up to 10 minutes a day that each child gets with each parent, just one-on-one time. And so during that time, I will often tell stories to my kids, or play games, or we'll color together, or I'll read to them, or we'll build with blocks or something like that, and the child gets to pick within reason. And kids absolutely look forward to that time and love it. In fact, the first word, or one of the first words that many of my kids learned was nip it. They would say, "Mine, nip it," because they were so eager to have that time with mom and dad one-on-one.
Yeah.
And it also provides a containment, so they know they can bring something up that they're troubled about or whatever during their snippet time if they want to. So it's real, and we found that we get all that time back. Like we get that time back plus much more, because there's much less conflict in the house. There's a sense of kids being, checked in on and really looked at, really listened to for that time in the evening. So that's another way of taking time.
I love it. Because I'm in a different stage of life, apparently. Like, my kids are grown.
Right.
So I love that example. I love it. It's wonderful. And I've tried to do things like with my one daughter in town. We just have Friday night dinners.
Oh yeah.
It's
See, it's
just
regular. It's regular. And it's planned.
Exactly. The others we have to do,
Right.
Skypes and things like that. But even there, we can feel connected with someone even nowadays. There are positive benefits to some technology that I get to actually see her, and I get to see her environment, and my son too. So just wherever your situation in life, it sounds like, it's like finding creative ways to make sure quality time happens.
Right. Yeah, because it's hard to have any of these things: heartfelt compassion, kindness, gentleness, patience, forgiveness, and above all that, the bond of love, if you don't have the time. If you don't have the time. And that's where a lot of times I'm starting with people, is the first thing is the time. Set aside the time.
But see, to me, I love what you're saying, because we were talking a little bit about fatherhood, right? Essentially. And a father who chooses to look for ways to have quality time with each of his children, and to do that every day, that to me speaks of kindness and compassion and patience, and because you are, what I mean? It's a father being engaged in loving, and that sets an example for them of what it is. That's changing that you did something in your system that has a positive effect. It's going to have a ripple effect with all of them. Right. And it's going to come back to their sense of worth, because they feel worthy. They feel like you value them, and you value that time, and that says to them they are worth something.
Right.
It doesn't mean they're worth everything and they get to rule the house. It means, but they are valuable and precious.
Right.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful gift. So snippets, yeah. And my 17-year-old son still comes and does a snippet. And
nice.
When I was 17, that wasn't something that, that I still did with my parents. I was very outwardly focused, so.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. So we're at the point where we start talking about our action items.
I think so.
Okay.
Mine is a little more general. I know is a lot more specific, but mine is, I'd like you to use that list of virtues, and I love them. I could keep saying them:
Okay,
compassion,
well,
kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, ultimately love. And I'd like you to think about what you can do today, and maybe try to put something and try to make it a regular everyday thing. But choose one little thing that you can do based on the virtues that will have a positive impact on your system. And that sounds kind of general, but it's because we tend to react. What happens in systems is somebody does something negative, so we react negatively, and then the negativity builds, and negativity is affecting everybody in the system multiple ways, and then bounces back to everybody, so everything is affecting everything. And so what we're talking about here is, but the converse is true. So choosing to react in a positive way, purposefully, maybe being more patient with someone. Maybe it's being specifically choosing a humility, or trying to go out of your way with kindness. Remember there was that movement way back, random acts of kindness.
right.
But don't be so random. Like, purposely choose an act of kindness that you're going to do in your family. And then I just want you to step back and watch and see if it has a ripple effect. See if it has a positive effect, and do that every day.
Okay.
What have you got, Peter?
So for me, I'm going to go back to my key theme: take time, and be deliberate about that time. So if you're married and you're not spending much time with your spouse, 20 minutes every day with your spouse. Or if that's hard to do on a daily basis and you're not doing anything on a weekly basis, let's schedule a date night where you go out. So really spending time with that important person in your life. If you're not married, then it could be with your time with your parents, or time with your children, or time with a close friend, or or some other loved person in your life. But really setting aside the time and doing it very deliberately, writing it in your planner or scheduling it in your organizer, or however you do it. It's setting aside that time, the first step.
I love it. And you know what? Our action items actually coincide, because you could do that as your systemic intervention. And I, if I didn't say it, like, you have to do that thing every day. I should have said that. It's not a one-time random thing, or else it's not a systemic change. Truly, it's just a one shot.
Right.
So if you choose, like, if it's 20 minutes of spending quality time with someone, like a loved one or spouse, then that's something you do every day. You're actually doing a systemic change. You're doing a systemic intervention in your family system. That's a beautiful example of one. So, and then feel free to comment if you saw it work, if it was helpful. Please, we need more comments. We want to hear from you, and what you like and what you like to hear more of. So we definitely want you to be aware of the fact also that we have all kinds of cool things coming up. We've got tons of new things we've got in the works for the new year. We're still doling out modules for how to help a loved one in distress. So that is a free course that is available on soulsandhearts.com.
Yep.
We have Fly on the Wall.
Yep.
Right, which is also just an interesting, if you want to get I was going to say bird's eye view, but I guess it's a fly's eye view of a bunch of psychologists talking about various issues. You want to listen in? Join us there, and keep watching. This program. Then we're available, obviously, on our website, but also on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. And if you're on there, please subscribe and like and all that fun stuff.
And spread the word. If you know of somebody that could really benefit from a show like this or from some of our other resources, please pass it on. We really want people to get to know that Souls and Hearts is out there, and we're at soulsandhearts.com. And
Well, have a Merry Christmas, too. We hope you have a wonderful Christmas season, because you're now entering into the season of Christmas, which is really the time the lights are supposed to go on, right? And the celebrations happen, right? Because it's Christmas. We were waiting, and now it's happened. So be joyful, it's joyful, and embrace the celebration this Christmas. So good to be with you. And I guess we'll wrap up with be still.
Believe.
Be loved.
Love.
Take good care.